Hey everyone! Have you ever felt that sting of failure? You know, that moment when you've given absolutely everything you've got and you're left with nothing? Well, today we're diving into an amazing Easter story that's all about that feeling. We're going to journey from the total exhaustion of trying to do it all ourselves to the incredible, overflowing abundance that happens when we just trust. So let's start here. This image, it's powerful, right? A lone fisherman, after a long, hard night of work, with absolutely nothing to show for it. This really gets at the heart of that exhaustion we feel when we're only relying on our own strength, our own clever plans, our own smarts. And that leads to this question, a big one. What happens when your best efforts just fail? I mean, really think about it for a second. That project at work, that relationship you poured your heart into, that personal goal, and it just didn't work out. It's a feeling we've all had, and it's right at the center of the story we're getting into today. Okay, so let's dive into the first part of this story. We're calling it A Night of Nothing, and it comes to us from the Gospel of John, and it's about these expert fishermen who are facing a total, complete failure. Now, the context here is so important. Remember, this is after the resurrection. The disciples? They're kind of lost, confused. So what do? Peter and the others go back to what they know best, fishing. And they work all night long and catch zero. Nothing. You know, in the scriptures, that word night often points to something deeper, a time of spiritual confusion or discouragement, when our own strength and all our experience just isn't cutting it. But then, as the sun starts to come up, everything changes. A voice calls out from the shore. And this, right here, is the turning point of the entire story.
Now, it's the risen Jesus, but they don't even recognize him at first. And he tells them to do something that sounds, well, a little crazy. Cast the net on the right side of the boat. I mean, these guys are pros. They've been out there all night, but they do it anyway. They obey. And that's the key. The breakthrough doesn't come from their skill, but from this one simple act of listening to his word.
And the result? It's just unbelievable. 153 huge fish. The nets are so full they can barely drag them in. So why that very specific number, 153? It's interesting. One of the early church fathers, St. Jerome, actually thought it was symbolic. He believed it represented all the known nations of the world at the time, sort of a hint at the church's universal, global mission. So you have this overflowing net, a direct result of their obedience. But John, in his gospel, points out this one tiny, crucial detail. The net didn't break. And this becomes this amazing symbol for the unity of the church. The idea is that even when it's filled to the brim with all kinds of different people from all over the world, it's Christ who holds it all together, preventing it from tearing apart. All right, let's zoom out a bit, because this story, as amazing as it is, doesn't stand on its own. When you start connecting it with the other scripture readings for the day, a much deeper truth starts to bubble up. A truth about how what we see as failure is actually the foundation for everything. Just look at how these pieces lock together. In the book of Acts, you've got Peter, who was once terrified, now preaching without fear. In Psalm 118, there's this stone that was rejected, tossed aside, that ends up becoming the most important stone of all, the cornerstone. And then in John's gospel, a night of total failure turns into a morning of incredible abundance. You see the pattern, right? In every single one of these stories, what looks like defeat is the very thing God uses as the foundation for his victory. And this whole idea of the cornerstone is absolutely central to all of this. Back in ancient times, the cornerstone was the most important stone. It set the alignment for the entire building. The scriptures take this powerful image and apply it directly to Christ. His crucifixion? To the world, it looked like the ultimate failure, the ultimate rejection. But through the resurrection, that very act of being rejected becomes the solid, unshakable foundation of our salvation. It's an incredible reversal. Okay, so that's some pretty deep theology, but how does it actually play out in a real person's life? Let's look at a real-world example of someone who really lived this out, this journey from rejection to complete fruitfulness. Let's talk about St. Magdalene of Canossa. So this is St. Magdalene of Canossa. She was born into this wealthy Italian noble family. I mean, she had it all: status, money, comfort. But she chose a path that was completely opposite of what her world expected, a path of service. And her life is like a perfect mirror of the readings we've been talking about. She lived with that same boldness as Peter,
trading in her high social status to serve the poor. She embraced the idea of the rejected stone by making the crucified Christ the absolute center of her life. And just like the disciples in the boat, she found true fruitfulness not in her own grand plans, which, by the way, often failed, but through simple, humble obedience to where God was calling her. You know, this isn't just a cool story about some fisherman 2,000 years ago or a saint from a few centuries back. It's actually an invitation for you right now, because the story ends with Jesus offering a meal, and that invitation is still open to us today. And just think about the tenderness of this moment. After they failed all night, after he performed this mind-blowing miracle, Jesus doesn't yell at them. He doesn't say, "I told you so." He just says, "Come, have breakfast." He just wants to feed them, to restore them, to be with them. And that, right there, is the heart of the Easter message. Our failures aren't met with judgment. They're met with an invitation to be fed and nourished by him. So how do we actually live this? Well, it can start with really simple things. Before you start a big task today, just whisper, "Jesus, I can't do this without you." During Mass, when they're collecting the offering, mentally offer up your own empty nets, your failures, your frustrations, your worries. And when you receive communion, hear Jesus saying those same words to you. Come, have breakfast. And then act. Act with trust, knowing that he's the one who will fill the nets. And this brings us to the ultimate connection, the whole point. That breakfast on the beach, it points directly to the Eucharist. This is the meal where we receive the risen Christ himself. He is the true source of all spiritual fruitfulness. It's the moment where our empty nets are finally met by his incredible, overflowing grace. So in the end, we're left with this simple but incredibly profound choice. We can keep trying to do it all on our own, toiling all night and ending up with nothing. Or we can listen for his voice, obey his word, and just trust. And when we do that, we'll find that our nets, our lives, will overflow in ways we could have never, ever imagined.